Welcome to Legacy Leaders. I'm your host, Ann Marie Sorrell, President and CEO of the Mosaic Group, your award-winning global marketing and advertising and public relations agency. Today, I'm super excited. We are joined by Chair Nikki Fried of the Florida Democratic Party, and today we will discuss the state of the Democratic Party, Black voter engagement, and the next midterm election, which is the election for Florida's next governor. Welcome, Chair Fried. How are you today?
I am doing great. I'm so honored to be on here with you today. This is going to be a fun conversation and a much needed conversation too.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're not going to take too long. We're going to dive right into it because there's so much to unpack and so little time, and we want to make sure our listeners get as much from you as possible. So for our listeners who may not be as familiar with you, which I don't know how they wouldn't be, but just in case there's someone who doesn't know you, give us a brief background of your journey to becoming the chair of the Florida Democratic Party.
Yeah, well, my journey's all over the place. But I started my leadership at the University of Florida, where I was an undergrad, master's in political campaigning, actually, and my law degree, where I was University of Florida's student body president, the first female in almost 2 decades. And then once I graduated law school, I was the public defender's office for about 4 years in Alachua County. And then eventually moved my way back down to South Florida, doing everything from protecting homeowners during the foreclosure crisis, and then eventually went into government consulting, where I was representing Broward School Board, at-risk children in the foster care system, and the expansion of access to medical cannabis for our patients here in the state of Florida. Fast forward to 2018, I decided to do something absolutely crazy, run for office in the state of Florida as a Democrat. And, we were able to be successful in that 2018 campaign. I have always said consistently that, that was not how I wanted to win that night. We had an entire ticket with Andrew Gillum at the top and Sean Shaw as Attorney General, Jeremy Ring as CFO, and of course, Senator that we had lost in that Nelson during that race. And then I was our only statewide elected Democrat for 4 years as our Commissioner of Agriculture, and spent those 4 years battling it out with Ron DeSantis, battling it out for protecting so many people in our state and trying to have balance in how we govern. And I decided to run for governor in 2021. Unfortunately, I was not successful in my primary, but I knew right after that, if we are ever going to win statewide and create that balance back, then we got to regroup and make sure that the Florida Democratic Party is in the strongest possible place to allow our candidates to be successful on the ballots, whether it's school board, all the way up to the governor, to U.S. Senate races. And that's when I decided in 2023 that after disastrous, one of the worst turnouts that we have seen here in Florida Democrats, one of the worst, if not the worst, election results that we've ever had in our state, I decided that, all right, if I believe in democracy and I believe in protecting the people of our state, I've got to give everything I can to make our state better. And that starts with the party.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that journey. And I was right there with you in 2018, campaigning for Gillum and the whole ticket, and definitely was heartbreak, but it was great for you to have won that. So congratulations. And so a lot of people may not understand the role of the actual organization of the Florida Democratic Party. Most voters, they register to vote. They know that they, have registered as a particular party affiliation or maybe no party affiliation, but they may not be involved with clubs and caucuses and things like that. So can you tell us a little bit more about the role of the Florida Democratic Party as well as your role and responsibility as the chair?
Yep. A political party in the state is the hub, is the gravity of where everything comes and goes. So we are the ones who, to your point, do year-round voter registration on the ground, getting into our communities, making sure that our local executive committees, as our local DECs from the counties, we've got 60 of them. Not every single county, especially some of our small ones in the Panhandle, don't have active DECs. But it is, our job at the local level to make sure that those DECs are strong, that they're out there in the community, that they're working on recruiting of candidates, education of those candidates. But most importantly, the Democratic Party, the party structure is to support our electeds and our candidates, and to make sure that we are putting in the foundational groundwork that when a candidate runs for office, again, whether it's a local level or statewide level, that they've got an operation on the ground, that the candidates should only be having to focus on their message, getting out there and talking to voters and making sure, especially here in the state of Florida, we cannot win, and nor can the Republicans win, without getting crossover support from independents, which are now almost a third of our state, and even being able to pull away some, Republicans that are just frustrated, whether it's on local issues or statewide issues. We have clubs and caucuses all throughout the state. We've got really robust statewide caucuses like the Black Caucus, Hispanic Caucus, Environmental Caucus, Disability Caucus. I mean, we got basically a small business caucus. And so it is our job to make sure that, one, we're recruiting people into those clubs and caucuses that have a special interest in whether it's, I guess, demographics or issue-based, and then leaning on those clubs and caucuses to really do a lot of education to the rest of us, to make sure that we're on point on messaging, that we are seeing what the focus is on those different clubs and caucuses. And it's our job to recruit candidates, to make sure that we've got strong candidates up and down the ballot, and to make sure that we also have the resources that are necessary. And so as chair, God, my day starts at 7 a.m. and goes until 11 o'clock at night. And really, I see my role as very different than potentially previous chairs. Most of the times when you think about a party chair, especially here in Florida, it's more of like the rah-rah. You're going to the galas and you're going to this event and you're given this like exciting speech to motivate the people. I've looked at it because of where we are in Florida, and because of my vast, background of different types of laws that I've practiced, having been our only statewide elected in the last 20 years, that I see my role as a little bit also of a strategist. How do we make sure that we're talking about the right issues? My job every day is to make sure that we're bringing in the resources and the funding that is necessary for the party, making sure that I'm helping get through any conflicts that may be happening. Because in a party like, Democrats, that the best part of the fact that we are Democrats is that we are a big tent and that everybody is welcomed. But in the same respect, some of the silver lining of doing that is the conflicts of internally, because we are such a big tent and everybody's got different viewpoints. Everybody's coming from different spaces and different backgrounds, and being able to make sure that everybody feels seen, heard, listened, and then there's actions that are based on, things that we're hearing on the ground. So my day is not only, I just got Republican phone calls. So my job is to interact with the ecosystem. It is to make sure that I'm on the ground, talking to our candidates, talking to our DECs, our clubs and caucuses, interacting with our donors, both on the state level, the national level, my interactions with other state chairs, doing best practices, what went right there in your state, what went wrong, how did you get to this place, whether it's year-round organizing or a better grassroots fundraising mechanisms. It's also, making sure that, compliance issues and just the behind the scenes stuff that is not sexy, but it's necessary to make sure that we're compliant. The days are long, but every single day is worth it because we're moving the ball forward.
Awesome. And real briefly, how does the Florida Democratic Party interact with the National Democratic Party?
And it's interesting because we are part of the bigger puzzle, and these are where, I get to come in. We've got the DNC, and we actually have a DNC chairs race and leadership races that will be up at the end of this month. And so we interact. Jamie Harrison and I talk, who's the current DNC chair. We probably interact weekly, whether it is during the height of the campaign of what's going on in Florida. How can I help? How can I lean in? Jamie, I need you down here. Where are some additional resources? Or I can't get through to this national donor. Can you help me get through this national donor? And so there's a lot of interaction. But my role right now, as we're going through a DNC chairs race, is to put a lot of pressure on the national party apparatus, including the donors, of like, hey, y'all have left us behind. Like, we as Florida have been a battleground and blue for decades upon decades upon decades. And we've lost so much ground, and we can't get out of this hole by ourselves. I have made it very clear. You cannot expect the Florida Democratic Party to solve all of these very complicated, because Florida is complicated. We are the one of the most, if not the most diverse state in the nation. It's just, again, what makes Florida so special, that the types of people that have made up the fabric of our state, whether it is those that are coming from Jamaica and, the Caribbean islands, to our Haitian brothers and sisters, to the Hispanic influence from those and from Cuba and Venezuela and Argentina and Brazil and Spain and and Russia. I mean, we've got so much international influence here in our state, that it is imperative for the national party to recognize that if the message doesn't resonate in Florida, it is not going to resonate across the country. And so it is part of my job to consistently, with the DNC, raise my hand and say, we've got a problem here, and I need help, I need backup, I need support. And unfortunately, they haven't been necessarily, not the DNC, it's not always the DNC's fault by any means. But when the national campaigns come in and they don't fund Florida where it needs to be, it hurts all of us. It hurts our down ballots.
Right.
It hurts just everybody feeling like we've been left behind, and we're so important in the greater conversations.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break, Chair Fried, and we're going to come back. When we come back, we're going to talk about Black voter engagement. We'll be right back.
I grew up down here in South Florida, so for me, it's a little bit more personal.
For the Mesman and Dover Law Firm, it's about community.
For us, South Florida's our home. You all are our people.
Our family. Our future.
The difference we'll make for you, your loved ones, your kids, matters. Because to us, it's personal.
If you need us, call us 24/7 at 866-954-MORE.
That's 866-954-6673. The Mesman and Dover Law Firm, youraccidentattorneys.com.
Welcome back, Chair Fried. So, as you know, the Black voting block is a very important block. And for many, many years, the Black community has been feeling really neglected or taken for granted with the Black vote. And of course, this last election was very disappointing, the general election. And as a result, that's, of course, less turnout, less engagement, and even change in party affiliation, which we've seen where Black voters have even changed to Republican or to independent. So what is your take on that? Is there a strategy that the party has in the state of Florida specifically to better engage Black voters and help Black voters understand, or is our vote taken for granted?
Yeah. And this is going to be a little bit of a longer answer, and it deserves to be. I want to go back even to 2018. I say this no matter what space I'm in, no matter where and how often in spaces. I would not have been elected Commissioner of Agriculture if it was not for the Black community. Sorry, I'm gonna get all emotional on this. I understand and I recognize that the organization and the amount of support that Andrew Gillum got from the Black community during that election, and the amount of turnout got me across the finish line. And so for 4 years as Commissioner of Agriculture, I spent a lot of time trying to lean back in and trying to figure out what can we as a party, as a political system, as an elected, do better to make sure that there are more voices at the table on issues. And so even as commissioner, I appointed a director that was in charge of DEI issues inside, not just inside the Department of Agriculture, which I was the first female ever elected in not only Florida, but the entire South. Agriculture is still a very white, male dominated industry. And so how can we have leaned in to make sure both on the agricultural side and the consumer services side that there was one, representation matters. So we made sure that in my leadership circles that I had a lot of Black and brown faces that were in my leadership team and my directors. I had the most diverse leadership team in the history of the Department of Agriculture. We did a lot of programming with the Urban League and NAACP. And making sure protecting Black farmers and consumer awareness on fraud that may happen that might be specifically targeted to the Black community. And then now as chair, I tried to do the same thing in my appointments and in my leadership. My entire executive board, which I inherited, but when it was being elected in 2020, I had endorsed, all three of my first vice chair, my secretary, and my treasurer, who are all Black. I have 4 vice chair appointments. 2 are Black. One was specifically assigned to be the Black outreach director for the party, to come up with a leadership council to make sure the diverse voices were being brought in from all parts of our state, to help with messaging, help with engagement. But these are things that we have to continue to improve on. This was, again, I took over this party and there was none of this. And it was just kind of like keep going with the same things over and over again. And so we want to make sure, again, going on to Black media spaces, any opportunity that I had over the last, realistically, 7 years, to get into Black spaces, to make sure that people hear, see, and most importantly, listen. But we have a lot of work to do. We have a significant amount of work to do. And I rely a little bit on our Black electeds too, who are representatives of certain communities that need to see that their electeds are stepping up to the plate and fighting for them too. Too often, and this is a problem that, and not just in the Black communities, but across the board, is that at this point where Democrats are in the state of Florida, that 95% of our current seats, whether in the House or in the Senate, are specifically drawn for Democrats. And so it is. And so a lot of times we have primaries, everybody battles it out in the primaries, and then that the person who won the primary has no real general election, and they don't see that person ever again, or, isn't engaged in the community until the next election cycle. And we got to break that culture that people need to be consistently showing up, consistently knocking on doors, consistently having town halls, and most importantly, listening to the issues on the ground, and not assuming that we know everything and know what is on top of mind. And I think that we as a party, specifically here in Florida, but we're also seeing it across the country. I mean, we saw that these numbers, is a big highlighted conversation of the last couple of years, is what is going on in the Black community. And, too often the campaigns and the electeds and the party apparatus show up right before an election and expect, just because we're there, because we got a D next to our name, that they're going to vote for, that there's going to be a vote and support there. And that's just
right. No,
and
it's not going to happen. So what will be done differently? Because I can tell you now, just to be very candid, number one, there's very little money spent with Black consultants. There's very little money spent with Black media. Like you said, the parties, and the candidates show up at the last minute, if they show up at all, and then you don't see them again. There's very little messaging that speaks directly to Black community issues. All the issues are very just kind of like jumbled and bundled together. And I know the Democratic Party does a good job of being inclusive. However, the party is not monolithic. So messaging and issues have to be segmented based on the community specific needs that the Democratic Party is working with. So I know personally, and even as an elected official myself, that those are some issues that need to be addressed. Because it's insane that, number one, if you don't have consultants, if you're not dealing with Black media, then how are you even reaching and engaging the Black community other than the traditional, let me go to the churches, and then you go to the churches at the last minute. So those strategies are a little antiquated, and something definitely has to change. So do you have any plans or solutions to, change some of those strategies?
Yeah, I think a couple of them, and talking about consultants, you're 110% correct. That, and it's not just a Florida thing. It is a democratic ecosystems thing, that as we're all talking through what just happened in the last election, that there was $2 billion that were spent. Where's all that money? Where did it go? Who got paid? And I think that there is a big conversation. And I think that's something that we as a collective have to spend time really investing in. As somebody, again, who has a master's in campaigning, had consultants on both my my agriculture race and my governor's race, we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we were hiring diverse consultants, making sure that I had consultants that were on my team. But that was me being deliberate in my hires. But now we got to make sure that we're training our candidates and our electeds to be thinking the same mindset. How do you make sure that you are hiring diverse consultants? And most importantly, too, which I've also found, is that we've got to do a better job actually leaning in and training on the campaign side of things. That if you went today in the state of Florida and you said, can you give me a list of minority vendors, whether it is consultants or it is digital firms or campaign managers, or name the gamut of things that get hired into a campaign, the list is not as long as and as deep as it should be. And so we all have to do our part in trying to look for good talent. And that's what I try to do inside the party, is to find good talent, to bring them in, to kind of train them. We are also looking at, and this is kind of why it's so important, I'm running for re-elect, is to be able to build on the foundation. And the mindset that I have is that I want to be bringing in a fellowship program inside of the Florida Democratic Party, people to get trained to do financing, to do campaign managing, to do all the things that we, people are so quick to be like, okay, I'm in Broward County, who's my team? And it's the same 5 people. Well, if we don't do a better job recruiting talent to stay here. So that's one, and that's a thing that we're going to do. And as far as the Florida Democratic Party and Black-owned media spaces, we're going to do better. As we are on here today, it's my first podcast that we've had in 2025. And it's us being deliberate to make sure that as we're kind of building out for the future, that we're incorporating and making sure that we have, that we're listening and that we are in present in spaces where this kinds of conversations are occurring.
I grew up down here in South Florida, so for me, it's a little bit more personal.
For the Mesman & Dover Law Firm, it's about community.
For us, South Florida's our home. You all are our people.
Our family, our future.
The difference we'll make for you, your loved ones, your kids, matters, because to us, it's personal.
If you need us, call us 24/7 at 866-954-MORE.
That's 866-954-6673. Demesman & Dover Law Firm, youraccidentattorneys.com.
Welcome back, Chair Fried. Definitely want you to finish your statement, and let's then talk about the upcoming gubernatorial election for 2026, which is right around the corner.
Yep. What I was saying is that as we took over the party in 23, there was nothing here, and that's not an excuse. And having to build the foundation just to kind of like get the organization up and running. And now we have to be more deliberate, and making sure that at the early stage now, that we are making those conscious decisions to spend more time on the ground. But it's also teaching our electeds. And I've said this too, as far as a Democrat, if you are in a Democratic seat, it means you have communities, whether you are a Black elected, it means you have, other minorities in your district. If you are a white elected Democrat, you definitely have minorities in your district. Making sure that you're going all the time and so you can be listening to what the concerns are of your constituents, but also making sure that they learn to trust that you are there for the right reasons.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I know we can go on and on about some of the strategies, and we'll definitely have to have you come back, especially as we gear up for the next election cycle. So with that being said, are there any Democratic candidates that's being considered or that is considering a run for governor? What can we expect over the next, 23 months or so before we have the midterm election?
Yeah, I think that this is going to, there's a lot of people that are chattering, a lot of people that are doing that analysis of, what is winnable in 26 and going through that. My take on things as we stand to is to make sure that we've got the foundation. We will, as a party, be consistently working with the top of the ticket and the statewide elected candidates, but to make sure that we've got the ground support there, making sure that we are leaning into our school boards, which we know that when it comes to local, electeds like yourself, that is really where so much of opportunities to do good for your constituents. And so making sure that we're giving the support for the school boards, the House, the Senate, the city and county commission seats, soil and water districts, because that's helping to build our bench for eventually being able to move up to the ranks is by getting that type of government experience. It's definitely going to be, and not going to lie, an uphill battle just based on where we are as a party. And voter registration is going to be essential to making sure that we've got the best chances to really look at ways to pull back some of these 30 years of one-party control of our state and seeing exactly what has happened from it.
Well, I would personally love to see a new, fresh campaign, not necessarily focused on candidates, but focused on why people should be engaged in the Democratic Party and why they should be engaged in voting, because I know the party's taken a hit these last two, the governor's race and then now this general election that just passed. So any closing messages that you'd like to leave with our listeners, as well as how they can get involved and reach you or reach the Florida Democratic Party?
Absolutely. First of all, I guess the biggest takeaway that I keep asking everybody is don't give up. Don't stay in this fight. Giving up and walking away isn't going to ever move the needle. We need everybody now, no matter how hard it is, no matter how heartbroken we still are, no matter how many battle scars that we all have in this process. If we walk away, why should anybody else come out and support or to get engaged? This is a time when leaders step up to the plate and they lean back in and they give of themselves to make the world a better place and to make Florida a better place. So I'm asking for people to say, stay in this fight with us. I'm not going anywhere. I love this state too much. I refuse to give up on her and the people that live here that are wanting us to be better, because that is the only way that we're going to get policies that are going to truly impact people's lives, whether it's at the educational level, economic opportunities, small business loans, you name the gamut. We can't get balance if we walk away from the fight. There are multiple ways to find me, whether it's every social media platform from Spotify to Spoutable to Twitter to Insta to you name it, I'm here. Also, my email address is nf@floridadems.org. I, try to always hone in on the fact that I'm accessible to everybody and anything. I want to be a better leader, and the only way you do that is by listening and then acting. And so, the more conversations and the more opportunities that I can interact with people to get people's perspectives on things, the better off we are all going to be. So stay engaged in this fight, continue showing up, get involved on the local level at your DECs, clubs, or caucuses, run for office. Running for office is one of the greatest experiences that anybody could ever have, knocking on those doors, talking to constituents, talking to people face to face, having people on the phones. It is one of those just unbelievable experiences that I would always recommend. If you've got it, you got ideas, you got a desire to do good, run for office.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chair Nikki Fried. Thank you for joining us from the Florida Democratic Party. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'm your host, Ann Marie Sorrell, and see you next time on Legacy Leaders.